Opa, welcome back. There's some new faces in the chat. Welcome, welcome. I'm assuming everything's working now. Spam, that's the word. There's all the socials. Today's recipe can be found over here. Everything start to finish. I'm shooting for an hour and a half. I know I'm getting a little adventurous with my timing. Let's see if I can pull this off. First things first, I'm going to start my yeast proofing. This needs 2.5 teaspoons of active yeast. Whoa. That's not 2.5 teaspoons. I've been meaning to refill my yeast container that I normally leave in the refrigerator with yeast that I leave in my freezer because I buy 2 pounds of this at a time for about the same price as 1 ounce from my local friendly grocery store. I buy this in bulk, of course, at Costco. Please sponsor me. Great, my sink's going to smell like yeast. Not like that's a bad thing. I have been doing a fair bit of baking lately. I picked up that really fancy baguette mold. And I shared some pictures of the, do I even call it chicken parm sandwiches? I guess. From the weekend. They were surprisingly good. Surprisingly good. Just need a little bit of warm water in here. I will add some sugar and whisk that up. I'll leave it alone for a few minutes. Recipe calls for 1.5 teaspoons of sugar, also known as half a tablespoon. We're going to add exactly, close enough, 1.5 teaspoons. Super cute little whisk. I just don't want any clumps in here. What I was going to say is some recipes call for instant yeast, some recipes call for active yeast. Instant yeast is active yeast, but much smaller granules. Instant yeast does not need to be proofed. It does not need to be activated like this. You can just throw it directly into your mixing bowl and have at it. Otherwise, it works the exact same because it is the exact same. Now here we need approximately, usually closer to 2.5 cups. We're looking for 300 grams. We're looking for about 300 grams of flour, and we want a hydration of about 80%, which means exactly 1 cup of water. Now, most bread recipes, the hydration percentage or the hydration ratio, or just hydration, is for every 100 grams or 100 units of flour by weight, mass, if you will. By weight, it's the percentage of water by weight. Some recipes call for more than 100%, which means you have more weight of water than you do of flour. But most breads, in general, they're around between 70 and 80%, usually 75 to 80. Now, there is some neat chemistry that happens with flour. How many slugs is 300 grams? I don't know. Is it 6,000 grains to a pound? I think so. Something like that. So I'd want 3/5 of 6,000. So I don't know, 3,600. Let's ask Google. How many grains in a pound? $7,000. Why did I think it was 6? If anyone's really curious, feel free to look up how many slugs in. Is that a real unit of measure, or is that just something funny? The dough is going to take between 30 and 60 minutes. The oven with the pizza stone is going to take probably 45 minutes to preheat. Here's my well-worn, well-seasoned pizza stone. The reason I use this pizza stone for pizza is to help the bottom of the pizza crisp up more quickly. The pizza can be blasted with heat on the top and from underneath with the pizza stone, and the stone itself doesn't get overwhelmed the way with like room temperature ingredients, the way that a normal pan would. It's the same reason why I like to use cast iron instead of non-stick, very flimsy pans, is because the cast iron pan holds onto a lot of heat energy. When I throw down a 1-pound steak, the pan still stays at its ripping hot 500 Fahrenheit or hotter. If you use a non-stick pan, that 1-pound steak will bring the temperature of the pan from nice and ripping hot down to room temperature in about 2 seconds. So the pizza stone gives us a more uniform, crispy crust. You can cook the pizza more quickly. In general, it just gives a better product. A pizza steel is even better. It's more gooderer. They're a lot more expensive and a little more annoying to use just because they're heavy. Otherwise, I think they're superior in all ways. Because if you happen to splash some water on your pizza steel, no big deal, it's not porous. Pizza stone, on the other hand, that might explode on you. It shouldn't, but it might. Just because it is a little porous, and if a bit of water gets in before it turns to steam, that pressure can crack the stone. I've personally never had it happen to me, but I'm sure it can. I'm sure it can. Okay, back to the dough. My yeast is happily bubbling, doing its thing the way it's supposed to. I'm going to throw in 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. Very, very, very precise measurements. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil to the yeast. 1. That looks like 2. I'm just going to throw a little bit of garlic powder and or basil. It's optional. Just going to put a little sprinkle in here. And the bottom of the pizza, on top of the stone, I can put some cornmeal down. And the reason why you'll see at some restaurants a layer of cornmeal, a bit of grit on the bottom of your pizza, is to give a tiny little bit of separation, to give a little more crispiness, and to help the pizza slide on and off of the pizza stone. What I don't have is a pizza shovel. So what I'm going to do is take the back of my big sheet pan. I'll have my parchment paper on here. I'm just going to slide the pizza on the parchment paper onto the stone. When I pull it out, I'll be taking the whole apparatus out at one time. Just double checking I have all my ingredients in here. I have my 2.5 cups, my water, my yeast, my sugar, olive oil, optional stuff. Good, 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 good. The longer we work the dough, and by work I mean knead it when there's more liquid in here, the more gluten forms. Gluten traps the bubbles of from the yeast and gives all of our doughs, all of our breads, that wonderful elastic property. Gives it a little bit of chew and some rising ability. Every time you're using your hands, bowl flour with liquid, you should scrape down the side. Get yourself one of these flexible bench scrapers, pastry scrapers, if you will, just to make sure there aren't any crusty bits hanging out on the side of your bowl. That's incorporated well enough. Speaking of well, what I like to do is have a little hole in the middle of my dough here and just pull, I'm going to use that later, pull the flour into the middle. This is the traditional way to incorporate your eggs into your semolina flour when you're making homemade pasta. Because you can do this on a clean work surface, you don't need a bowl. Freaks some people out. It's like, I've seen what you do on that counter. I mean, I've seen you have raw food on that counter. That can't be safe. So once this is incorporated a bit, I'm going to get in here with both hands, well, at least one. I need to keep this all very clean for YouTube. I've been publishing my videos directly to YouTube right after the stream is over. Unedited, raw footage. But for the most part, it's pretty clean. It's pretty clean. Normally I do this with my right hand. Ignore the hairy arm. Now, whenever you're kneading whenever you're kneading dough, you might not have the perfect ratio of flour to water. Flour's it's a little tricky because it has its own moisture content. And depending on how your flour is packed, how you scoop it out, if you've sifted it a few times or not, the volumes may change the density might change. Which is why it's always best to weigh your ingredients. At the same time, doughs are very forgiving. Because if you have too much flour, add a little water. If you have too much water, just keep kneading and let that extra water evaporate on you. I'm just going to switch hands here. Try to scrape down the side of this bowl. Okay. So in general, I'm just taking one end of the ball of dough, flipping it back, punching it down a few times, turning it 90 degrees, pulling, folding it back, punching it down a few times. If you don't have a whole lot of hand strength, what you can do, just on your counter, just use your palm, press it down, stretch it out, turn it 90 degrees. And that's all you need to do. This will develop all the gluten you need. I probably should have floured the work surface, but what you gonna do? I know it's clean because I just sanitized it before I started. This dough is a touch sticky, so I could add a bit of flour. I could just let the lightly floured work surface absorb into the ball of dough like it's doing, and I can just keep kneading it. In a few minutes, this is going to become nice and pillowy soft. It's not going to be sticky at all. That's the consistency that I want. Now, if this were still wet at this point, I would add a tablespoon of flour. I would just sprinkle it on. And I would spend a few minutes kneading the flour in. If it was still wet, repeat. If it's too wet, repeat. In general, though, I like to just keep working the dough and let the extra moisture evaporate. If it's too dry, like if you can't do this easily, add a tablespoon, maybe 2 tablespoons of water, spend a couple of minutes working it in, and then adjust. Small adjustments. I say this every time, small adjustments. Now, if you weigh your ingredients and you happen to have a stand mixer or a fancy Cuisinart dealio, you can just throw all of your ingredients in with a dough hook, let it run for 5 to 15 minutes, depending on what you're making, and you're done. This is nice and pillowy soft. It's taking a few seconds for this to spring back. That's because I don't have a whole lot of, well, really anything formed in here. I want to make sure that my bowl is clean. I don't have any crusty bits in here. Almost every bread making recipe says to put a few drops of oil in the bowl, swirl the dough ball around, and then cover it. This is so much easier. Bust out your nonstick cooking spray. Just give it a light spritz all around. Don't go too heavy on the oil, because when we punch this down and start working it, the oil that's on top, if there's too much, it'll create folds, and it takes a while to work that oil through the dough. The reason for the oil is to keep the moisture locked in. So as this ball of dough starts to expand because it's rising, the thin layer of oil will just stretch and keep the moisture locked in. Part 2 of our moisture saving process is to put some cling wrap on top. And most recipes call for just putting a tea towel across the top, and or just leaving your dough in a draft-free kind of warm area. Now this is going into my oven with the light on, which is usually all of the heat that I need. But just to make darn sure that all of my moisture is staying locked in here, I'm just going to cover the top with some cling wrap. Of course, cling wrap from Kirkland. We're fully expecting to be sponsored one of these days, just not today. The other use for these bench scrapers, it's for cleaning your work area. After about 15 minutes in the oven, I'm going to remove the dough and I'll start preheating the oven to 475. It's good. Like I said, it's going to take about half an hour to get to temperature with the pizza stone in there. So in the meantime, we're going to get our ingredients ready. Second part of the recipe is the actual pierogi pizza. Starts calling for 1 pound of pizza dough. So we had 300 grams plus 240 grams of water, close enough to a pound. I need 3 medium potatoes. Now, I personally don't like measurements like this, because what I consider medium might be a little different than what you consider medium. Medium potato in my world is about fist-sized, but my fist is a little bigger than yours. That's a medium potato, close enough. We're looking for russet potatoes. We're looking for the brown ones, not the waxy ones. So not the red or yellow ones. And we are not going to, don't I? Yeah. Things like the juice of 1 lemon, depending on the lemon, you're looking at 2 to 5 tablespoons, usually 3-ish. Like a large egg versus a medium egg, there are ranges on the various Health Canada and US, I think the USDA site has some ranges for it. It's not as precise as I'd like, but close enough. So I'm going to give these potatoes a good scrub and a wash. Now you might have, for those of you who have been here for a while, here's my normal vegetable brush. But I also have these scrubby pads. Now these scrubby pads are really neat. They're basically, and by basically I mean exactly, like the loop end of Velcro. This stuff is amazing for scrubbing. It will not hurt your non-stick appliances. And it scrubs the heck out of things like veggies. This recipe specifically calls for not peeling your potatoes. Strikes me as a little odd. Okay, so this has been kind of scrubbed just to get the dirt removed. But if I take this, you can see that I'm actually scrubbing the skin off. So I can just do a light scrub with this as well. My dear sister brought me a 3-pack of these from Canadian Tire, of all places. I think there were something like 3 for $10 or something. They last a heck of a long time. The one that I was using until, well, last week, I'd had for well over a year. And I've heard people use it for exfoliation. Just seems kind of weird. Ivan, thank you. 36 months. Wow. Thank you so much. Yeah, after being away from my cameras for a few weeks, we started off last week's stream with a hype train while I had my starting soon countdowner happening. That was very sweet. Okay, 3 scrubbed, cleaned potatoes. I'm going to bust out my mandolin. Now this, while technically is a gadget, how the heck do I remove this? This seems so fancy. Wait a second. How do I remove this? There we go. Mandolins are a fantastic way to cut yourself. Please be careful whenever you're using a mandolin. Use the included guide. Don't do this. Just slide your hand up and down because this blade is very, very, very sharp. If you don't have a mandolin, not a problem. You can use a knife and a cutting board. And just to be thorough, I will demonstrate both ways. First things first, I'm just going to cut just the tips of these potatoes off. And I am going to get a bowl of water. For these pieces of potato, because I don't want them to turn brown from oxidizing, being exposed to the air. So I just have a bowl of water, and that's where I'll be throwing my potatoes. Using the claw, I'm going to use my knuckles as a guide for the knife, and I'm just going to be pushing the knife forwards. So I'm getting pretty consistent thicknesses. I mean, these are almost identical. I mean, I think they're very close to identical. You don't need to be super duper extra precise, although it is nice. It is nice if your potatoes have a uniform thickness. And you know what? I'm not going to use my mandolin. Don't need to. Not today. And then I won't have to deal with someone yelling at me for using a gadget. I didn't know this could fit. I'm supposed to be safe for work. Quit doing this to me. There we go. When you get towards the end of your potato, what you can do is just cut a flat section like this, and now my potato's not going to roll around. So once again, I'm going to just trim off both ends. And we want to be about between 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch. So 1 to 2/4 thick. We're talking about currency. These two pieces are way too thin. I'll be throwing them out. Again, I'm getting towards the end. This potato is sliding around a bit, so I'm just going to trim the bottom so it's flat, so it doesn't roll around. And last but not least, potato number 3. Mandolins are really handy. They're also kind of super dangerous. And they are also a real pain in the butt to clean. So if you're just using it for a little bit of vegetable prep, save yourself the hassle. Don't use it. If you need to have super consistent cuts, either for presentation or because of the specific food you're cooking, especially if you're doing bulk veggies, then yeah, go ahead. But in general, it's not really worth the effort. Now, as long as I'm careful, I don't need to run this through a strainer. If I get a little bit of bacon bits in here, it's not the end of the world. Now, I'm going to be eventually taking this and mixing it. Seder, welcome. I'll be mixing this 1-to-1 with flour while I'm cooking it in a pan. So I'll be making a roux, and then I'm going to slowly be adding more liquid and taking that roux to something more like a gravy. And I'll be using that for making some homemade poutine, but bacon poutine with extra bacon. I can leave this out at room temperature. It's perfectly food safe. It's animal fat. Good for what ails ya. Part of my vegetable prep here is about 1/2 cup of bacon bits, which is going to be something like 1/2 pound of bacon strips, or like 5 or 6 large strips. So there's the bacon. I'm just going to run this with my knife. I cooked the entire package of bacon in my cast iron pan, which I've shown many times now. This was done on medium-low heat. I let it cook for it was like 40 minutes or so. It wasn't entirely unattended, but it's pretty much a fire and forget kind of recipe. Well, step anyways. I broke apart some of the pieces of bacon. Like I literally took the whole pack of bacon, which was half a kilo, 1.1 pounds. Did I even cut this in half? No, I don't. I did cut it in half. And I just had like a sixth of the pack laid around. The pan, again, medium low heat. I stirred it around a few times. After I stirred it around a few times, it was easier for the strips to be pulled apart. And here we are. I don't want the bacon to be super fine, but I also don't want big pieces like this. I'm looking for the average piece to be maybe 1/4 of an inch across. I had literally none of the bacon. No, we're both under the weather, and here we are. Client from day job was over last week, and I think they introduced the plague to my hallowed sanctum here. And once again, we're in minus 40 weather for the 5th time in 7 weeks. Yeah, I know. You're over it though, right? You seemed fine on Sunday. The first time I got the plague, I was done with the plague within a week, but I happened to pick up pneumonia at the same time, and that lingered for a lot longer than pneumonia normally stays with me. And the second time, it was pretty similar. I was testing negative within a week, but I still felt like poo-poo caca for a few weeks after that. Make sure your water is above the surface of the potatoes. Make sure that the potatoes are all submerged. It's another way to put that. Otherwise, the potatoes will start to turn reddish brown on you. Almost like a rusty potato, which it literally is a rusty potato. Okay, so this bacon I will deal with later. This, I believe, this is already almost doubled in size, so we're almost ready to start working this. The pizza stone itself, once it starts to get stained, you really can't clean it. You can take a firm scrubby brush. Some people have had success with making a paste of baking soda, really rubbing it in, and then rinsing it off with vinegar, and then giving it a very good rinsing with water, and then make sure it's 100% bone dry before you even think about putting it anywhere near an oven. I might do that one of these days. Okay. So the potatoes are going to be baked on a sheet in a few minutes. I have a humble onion. Now, normally I would recommend using a jalapeno pepper or maybe red or yellow bell peppers. Something with a little bit of heat to it, though, would be nice, since I don't have any of those handy. I do have some dried hot peppers, but I'm going to turn that into a sauce. They've actually been desiccating in my fridge for the last year and a bit. So we'll see how that goes. I figure it's going to make a few ounces of a really nice hot sauce. And if I like it, I will plant a lot more of those peppers this year and maybe make a few bottles for myself. Here's the point where I would say I highly recommend you have a bowl handy or a garbage container within arm's reach of your work surface. Do what I say, don't do what I do. I'm actually not going to have a whole lot of mess for my prep today. But in general, yeah, like a small bowl or a small pail of some sort, or a garbage bag tucked in underneath one of your drawers saves a lot of time, because instead of me having to do this and then walk all the way over to my garbage and then dump this thing in the garbage and then walk all the way back, I could just scoop this up and drop it into a bowl or whatever receptacle is beside me. Now, here I have one onion. I want this diced. So I'm just going to cut this in half one way. So making vertical cuts, not all the way through, so this does stay together. And this takes advantage of the geometry of the onion, because this becomes magically diced. And then when we get towards the end, just a couple of quick chops. Just a coarse dicing. Okay, I'm going to drain the water. Just going to drizzle a couple of tablespoons of oil onto my potato onion mixture. Something around a half teaspoon of salt, quarter teaspoon of pepper. For the astute out there, yes, that was a container of pink Himalayan salt. Actually, it was pink salt. It's not from Himalaya. It is from Pakistan. So these potatoes are kind of stuck together. The shaky and flip over of the pan, the bowl. I think those are the only two containers that really get shook up. Don't do this with oily hands because you might slip, like I'm about to. Yeah, I've got a lot less control right now. You want to push give it a little bit of a lift. The stuff's going to keep going because of momentum, and it's going to fold back, and then you just catch it and repeat. There's nothing fancy to it. It is practical though, especially in a pan. But in general, unless you've practiced it, just use a spatula. It's just like cracking an egg with one hand. I've done it many, many, many times. Once in a while, the yolk breaks, or I get a piece of eggshell in there, because it's a low quality egg. I don't like doing it to show off, per se. It does save a bit of time, but experience has told me and has taught me that when you go to show off, hubris kicks in. I almost dropped this. Hubris kicks in, and bad things happen. But in general, I can take an egg in each hand, crack them, no problem, 9 times out of 10, maybe more. It is time efficient because I've done it a bunch and I've practiced it. And even then, I still screw up once in a while. So here's the potatoes, here's the onions, bit of seasoning. Now I don't want these to be layered too, I don't want a whole lot of overlap here. I want these potato slices to be mostly separated. Once my oven beeps 475, I'm going to pop these in until the edges of the potatoes are just turning a little golden brown. I want these to be mostly cooked because on the pizza, there's going to be a sauce underneath. There's going to be cheese on top. The potatoes aren't going to cook a whole lot more. So I want them basically completely cooked because the rest of the pizza is cooked other than the dough. The cheese doesn't need to be cooked. The bacon's cooked. The sauce doesn't need to be cooked. So yeah, there's just a little bit of overlap here. So this is ready to go in a few minutes. Next, the sauce. The sauce is half a cup of sour cream, quarter cup of Caesar dressing, which I don't have, some Parmesan cheese, and some red pepper flakes. Let's make some Caesar dressing. Now, if I had a little more life in me, I would make my own mayo right now, but I'm going to take the coward's route and use my mayo shovel eyes. Welcome. Kirkland mayonnaise, which has more than doubled in price in the last 2 years. Not happy with that. Is it worth my time to make my own mayo with the price of eggs? I think it actually still is. The problem is oil, because olive oil has more than doubled in price since the fall. Actually, maybe since the summer. And even importing olive oil from back home, the shipping is around, right now, I think $450 for a 20-gallon jerry can. Vegan mayo is almost the same price as conventional mayo. I believe it. I believe it. especially if you're getting a good quality mayo that uses good quality oil. And that's mostly just because of the price of eggs. But if you're getting a mayo made with olive oil, you're probably paying like $20 for 2 pounds of it, give or take. Okay, so I have half a cup of mayo. I need 1 minced garlic clove. And even with the exorbitant price of food, you're still way better off cooking it yourself at home. Even more so now, huh? I'm always trying to look at the positive, These days we can complain about so much. There's so much to justifiably complain about. I'm trying to look at the upside. And I think there is an upside to food prices being ridiculous, and that's people should be tuning in to watch me cook and learn how to save money. How to turn your misery into my profit. I'm such an ass. It's a good skill to have, though, in all seriousness. Now, I could just whisk the liquids together, or I could just pour everything in as I go, which, of course, is what I'm doing. Do as I say, not as I do. But one thing I am going to do as I say, and that is measuring my stuff not above my container. You'll see a lot of people measuring ingredients right over their bowl. Sorry if that's a little glary. I actually measured my lemon juice into this cup off to the side, because if I happen to slip, if I have too much lemon juice in here, it's going to be less than ideal. I need 1 tablespoon of water. I need 1/2 teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce. It's not Worcestershire, it's Worcestershire. I'd also accept Who's Your Sister. Make sure about fish allergies before you give people Worcestershire sauce, because it is made with anchovy. I tried an experiment last year with monetization. I turned it on for a month, and I think I got, and this is when I had a lot more viewers, before people got settled in from post-plague. This was back when I was getting an average of closer to 20, like 15 average consistently. And I was streaming like consistently 4 times a week, like 12 hours a week, 15 people. So that's what, like 1,200 eyeball hours per month. That was worth a couple of bucks. So no, it wasn't worth 2 cents. I also have zero complaints about the pay system on Twitch. And I think I'm one of the few people that doesn't complain too loudly about it. Twitch does all the work. They do all my advertising. They take care of all of my everything. I just show up, and thanks to all y'all that subscribe or donate, even just watching, I get a couple of bucks, and it's a win for me. I need 1/3 cup of grated Parmesan cheese. Now this I'm going to free pour, because I know what 1/3 cup looks like. It's exactly that. I know my Parmesan container does not spew out liquid, and I'm never Very likely never going to drop it. And here I'm going to need 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt and a little bit of pepper to taste. Perfect timing. A bit of salt. You mean Annie's with the bunny on it? I did pick up a couple of cans of garbanzo beans, also known as chickpeas. So I have dried, I have canned, and I believe next week on Monday I'm going to be doing a side by each hummus comparison. Okay, my potatoes are going to sit on top of my pizza stone. Woo, it's smoky. I'm going to take a look. Ivan, thanks for tuning in. You have a great night. We will see you soon. A very simple Caesar dressing. One sec. There's just a little bit of smoke coming off the pizza stone. There might have been some oil splatter in my oven itself. I've been baking at a higher temperature than I normally do lately, so almost every time I use my oven now, when I open the door, I don't really see it, but my smoke detector picks it up. Hence the alarm. I have my various doors open. Don't worry about me. I got various fire extinguishers handy. It's all good. Okay, back to my sauce. Need 1/4 cup Caesar dressing. Need 1/2 cup of sour cream, which is half of one of these containers. Half of one of these containers. And I will be using the rest of that sour cream at some point soon. And I need, yeah, that's it. This is my sauce. It's usually a good idea to clean your work area as you go. Highly recommend it. Give it a full 5 stars on TripAdvisor. Sour cream, Caesar dressing, Parmesan cheese. I actually put a little bit too much in the Caesar, so good enough. And some red pepper flakes. Just a quarter teaspoon or a couple of shakes. I measured it into the lid before I poured it out. And this is the pizza sauce. Because this stuff is fantastic to serve with pierogies. And the whole theme is pierogi. Now the final topping is 2 cups of 1 each of cheddar and mozzarella. I happen to have a mix of both. It's one of the few luxuries that I buy from Costco. I do pay about a 20% premium for getting my various cheeses pre-shredded. For me, it's worth it because I don't want to be spending a bunch of time shredding my own cheese. If I was working in a kitchen, if I was cooking for a bunch of people, if I had like 4 to 6 people living here, um, I would get lots of cheese and shred it as needed. But because I'm usually cooking for 1, maybe 2, it's just easier for me to buy bags of the stuff pre-shredded. So the final topping is the cheeses, the cooked bacon, and a bit of diced green onion. Now I don't have any. I don't feel like doing that. I might have some chives. I kind of just want something green to put on top of my. I'm just going to use some dried chives just to have some color. Prep's all done. Let's take a look at the potatoes. Well, they're sizzling. I think they need another 5 or 10 minutes. And then I need to let them cool down a bit. But we are right now 1 hour into the stream. I should have put the potatoes in earlier. I actually should have preheated the oven before I started. But that's kind of cheating, isn't it? When I made baguettes last Friday, I TV magicked the overnight proofing process, but I did show everything, all the steps. To make a good baguette, you're putting in less than half an hour of time in the kitchen. There's a whole lot of waiting. There's a whole lot of overnight letting stuff happen on its own. But as far as interacting with the ingredients, half an hour tops. And it's so worth it. It is so worth it. I honestly can't remember having a baguette better than what I made last Friday. That might be because of a bad memory. This thing is the real star of that episode. You can see through this. So this is a fiberglass mesh sprayed with high temperature safe food grade silicone. And that's it. And it's very, 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 very bendy. The ones that I made on the weekend, I didn't bother treating like normal baguettes. I treated it like regular dough. I just rolled it out to shape and I proofed it actually in here. It wasn't quite as crusty on the outside and chewy as normal baguettes, but it was still really, really, really good. I do recommend making your own bread at least once in a while, it's a really good skill to have. Now this is more than doubled. And what I'm going to do is just gently punch down some of the bubbles. If this reminds you of a ciabatta, because it kind of is. I mean, I could just take this as is, drown it in some olive oil, throw some herbs and seasoning on top, bake it, and fantastic. So there isn't too much oil on there. When I roll this into a ball, it's going to hold its shape, and we're not going to get a whole lot of folds on the bottom, but that's actually not too bad. If I had more oil on top, these folds would be a lot more pronounced. But I've clearly preserved a heck of a lot of the moisture in here. Yeah, it's kind of perfect. See, there's just a little bit of color forming on the edges. I want to give these another 10 minutes. Any questions? Anything anyone wants to talk about? Appliance repair? How to keep your refrigerators running for more than 4 months at a time? There's actually not a whole lot you can do. Keep your coils clean. Make sure there's airflow between your appliance and the wall, and the appliances beside it if needed. In the back of your refrigerator, make sure you're not pressing things all the way to the wall, to the back wall, because you need airflow to go usually from the bottom up. Or the top down, because that makes a lot more sense. To have the compressor and the fan blowing cold air from the top and letting it fall down. Yeah, in general, proper airflow is the number one challenge with refrigeration systems and AC systems. Because those fins on your window shaker or your outdoor central AC unit, those fins should get cleaned at least once a year. You can clean it with a stiffish wire brush. Don't spray with your garden hose unless you disconnect it first and you're not going to use it for a day. You can go to your local HVAC supplier and try to buy a can of foaming, self-cleaning coil cleaner. I think the retail price on that's probably $20 a can, and that'll last you a few years. It's a heck of a lot cheaper than paying an HVAC person to come down and do the exact same thing. If you're not very handy, well, you're going to pay someone or just let it go till it breaks. Speaking of proper airflow, I'm going to go close my patio door because it's wide open and have a fan sucking in all that 40 below air from outside, and it's getting a little chilly. So I will be right back. I'm super curious what goes into vegetarian Worcestershire sauce. Vegan, actually. Cinnamon, soy, maple, black pepper, brown sugar, onion powder, garlic, water, apple cider vinegar. So it's the usual top 5 spices, maple syrup, and brown sugar. That's the only thing remotely interesting. Well, soy sauce is going to bring a fair bit of umami, and I guess that's about it. Wow, who'd have thunk? I don't need any of this. I think I'm done with my cutting board as well. Wow. This is a surprisingly not messy recipe. Very surprisingly. Almost too surprisingly. Okay, so this potato is getting a little bit of color. I grabbed it from the edge. I'm gonna just want to see if it's cooked. I'm pretty sure it's cooked. Oh yeah, it's cooked. Okay. Yeah, you can see the edges are starting to get a bit of golden. Ignore the stuff along the very edge though, but this stuff, it's just starting to get a little bit of color. Good enough. Now, you can't rush good food, and I'm the first one to criticize, especially myself, of saying good enough, but it is good enough. The potatoes are cooked. Mm. Which means it's time to make a pizza. Just going to lightly flour my work area here. Now, I could use a rolling pin, and I'm going to lightly flour. Just a little bit of pressure. Turn it 90 degrees. Give it a little bit of pressure. 90 degrees, and I'm going to repeat this, and that will keep my dough fairly round. I want to roll this out until it's about 14 inches. Give or take. I'm going to flip it over a couple of times too. Now, if you're going to do this by hand, and just stretch and pull your dough. If you want to do it like real pizzeria style, you want to do it until you can basically see through your dough. And if your pizza dough is springing back quickly, you need to let it rest a little longer. This is fine. It's not springing back quickly at all. If anything, I might have let it rest a little too long, but I think we're still good. And just a little bit of pressure. Um, you know what I am going to do is grab some. I don't have any big containers of parchment paper anymore. Costco has these extra wide rolls, which is perfect for stuff like this. So what I am going to do is just put down 2 sheets. Just so I can manipulate this a little easier. Okay, good enough. Now, here is my sauce. I'm going to put this down till it's about half an inch from the edge. I could do some fun stuff with the edge. I could roll it over. I could make like a stuffed cheese crust pizza. If I had some mozzarella strings, like those fun snack sized mozzarella sticks. So just a little bit of overlap. It's funny how steps like this. I'm thinking of the fan for a while. I find it funny how steps like this seem intimidating to people, probably because it seems like it's very time consuming. It really isn't. I mean, I've been at this for maybe a minute tops, and I'm almost halfway done, and I'm doing this one handed. Get really pretty. I can tuck that underneath. Ba-do. 20 more minutes and we're done. Famous last words, right? Ooh, I might be a little close on the potatoes. Yikes. I guess I should be comparing my fist size to other people's fists more often. I don't know. YouTube censors, forget I said anything. I think I have close to exactly the right amount. Wow. I do have pretty close to the exact right amount. Thurina, 37 months. Good Lord. Thank you so much. I'm just going to scrape all these wonderful onions. So these onions are basically fried now. Just still, they're not crispy fried, but they're nice and moistly fried. As our governor would say. Yeah, if you ever miss the lotto, let me know. I'll cover it. No, this is the base is sour cream with Caesar dressing, basically, and I have lightly oven fried potatoes with a bit of onion. Just want to follow all these steps properly. I'm going to turn my oven down to 4 1/4. It should be there already. Okay, so now I'm going to sprinkle some of my bacon. And by some, I mean a good amount. And some of my garnish, which would have normally been some green onion. There's some dried chives. And then I have 2 types of shredded cheese here. A cup of each, so a cup of each, and there's 2 of them. So there's about 2 cups of cheese. Okay. So now this is going to go into my oven. And this is one of the many beauties of using parchment paper for everything, because my pan is basically still spotless. And because my pan is mostly spotless, I can use it as a pizza shovel. So I slid everything over onto my pan, and all I'm going to do is put this on top of my pizza stone, yoink it back, hopefully not make a mess. Otherwise, I would take, I'll show you what I would do. Clean this up just a little bit. Face full of something hot. You can do something like that. Now, this stone is really, really, really hot. Okay, this is going into the oven. Yeah, there's something in my oven that's causing a bit of smoke that I'm having a hard time seeing. So time to open my balcony again. So we're going to bake at 500 Fahrenheit for 10 to 15 minutes or until the pizza top is golden and the cheese is bubbling. Something like 10 to 15 minutes. I need to get one of those hanging thermometers from my oven because I don't trust it. I don't trust the thermometer, the thermostat that's in there. Maybe I have trust issues. I don't know. Therina, I have something that you might be vaguely interested in. There's these scrubby pads. I think they're made in Poland, but it's the loop part of Velcro. So I think it's all cotton, but it's really, really, really abrasive for cotton to the point that I can scrub my potatoes, the skin off. It's perfectly safe for Teflon. And some people use it for exfoliating their skin. I think a 3-pack was around $10. So like $8 US, maybe 7. I got it at Canadian Tire. How does it work on mushrooms? Probably too well. It probably scuffs them up. I'm going to be doing something with mushrooms in the next couple of days. I need to make some sort of a stroganoff. So I will scrub one with this, and I'll send you pictures. I believe the last time I used one of these pads on a mushroom, it gouged the cap. Like for mushrooms, I would recommend something with a brush like this, because this is my normal vegetable brush. But if I want to give something a good scouring, these things are wicked awesome. While we're waiting, before I taunt everyone with this Greek pizzeria quality Greek pizza, if you ever want to find yourself in the greater metropolitan Winnipeg region, God knows why you'd want to. But if you do, and you also want to happen to drop by my place, hang out in the green room on the casting couch, join me or kick me out of the kitchen and do a stream all by yourself or guest with me. If you want to do any of the aforementioned activities, all you need to do is send a self-addressed stamped envelope to this guy, care of here. I'll hook you up. And someone did ask the question, how do you get a self-addressed stamped envelope from the US to here? Does anyone know? I mean, I eventually blocked them, but am I kidding? I don't think I am. Can you get Canadian stamps in the States? I mean, I don't know why you'd want to, but yeah, it's 40 below again. Again. And 40 below is the magic number where the Celsiuses and the Fahrenheits are the exact same temperature. Yeah. If you're not used to it, it's pretty cold. You do get used to it pretty quickly if you live here. Like within a few months, you do get used to it. If you're just visiting, no, don't do it. Airmail stamps for mailing stuff overseas. Yeah, but that's mailing from there to overseas. How do you get a self-addressed stamped envelope? Or stamped, I guess. I've brought this up a bunch of times. My cousin Nick came to stay with us for a few months. He was thinking about doing his computer science degree here. He lives in Greece. He came to Canada. He stayed for the winter and he said he loved it. And I'm like, you're crazy. We had a very, very mild winter that year. It was very mild. So he applied, he was accepted, registered, came down, got set up with an apartment. And then I think just out of stubborn pride, he said he was fine with the snow and he still liked it. But the second year of having to scrape his windshield clean of the ice every day in the winter, he kind of gave up and said it was. He used some unpleasant language to describe it. Is this a trick question about the stamps? No, it's not. I'm very serious. Like, for all the joking about sending a self-addressed stamped envelope, I'm very serious. If you want tickets to the show, you need to send the self-addressed stamped envelope. The pizza dough is puffing up brilliantly. What I'm going to do is take the pizza stone, I'm going to rest it on here, and then I'm going to slide the pizza onto the work surface and let it cool down for a bit. I'll take some pictures and then that will be the end of the stream. And then we'll play some games if there's enough interest. Oh, neat. But how do you get a Canadian stamp? Or does Canada Post send honor like US stamps? I don't know. Okay, well, it sounds like you know, Mrs. Smarty Pants, you know all the stuff. Or Hexia says you can just prepay the postage. Well, thanks. Gronch, you asked if there was something that I'm not good at. Knowing post systems is one of them, apparently. Okay. I'm going to bring the pizza out first so you can have a good look at the finished product. And then I will slide it onto the counter and wrap it up. Canada's neat. We have these perpetual stamps. If you see a stamp with the letter P on it, it stands for perpetual. You can use that for a normal stamp, regardless of the current price of stamps. Any stamp with a P on it is honored at the current normal postage rate. So when it was 35 cents, a stamp with the P was worth 35 cents. Now that it's like $1 or whatever, the same stamp is worth $1 or whatever. Is the E for eternal, evergreen, everlasting, Euclidean? I don't know why. Okay, well, this is the cheese is golden, it's bubbling. Here's our pizza. I'm gonna zoom right in to this perfectly finished crust. Oh, come on. Nothing? Not a, oh my God, I'm drooling, I'm so hungry, feed me, wah? Nothing? Wow, I suck today. No, it's pierogies. It's Perogy Pizza. Now, this should just slide off. Yeah, there we go. And last step is I'm going to zoom right down to the bottom and I will lift up the corner and you will see, hopefully, perfectly done bottom. So this is it's not crispy. The bottom will be a little crispy. This is floofed up a bit. It's going to have some chew to it. It's going to leave it alone, and the pizza is good. If I wanted this to be a crispier crust, I would have rolled it thinner. I would have rolled this thinner and cooked it at a slightly higher temperature for just a little longer. So this gets cut up, served with a dollop of sour cream, maybe some more. We'll pretend these are just green onions, chives, if you will. And that's it. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Stick around for the games. Simple ingredients, no fancy gadgets, no silly techniques, or some combination of the aforementioned. A dollop of daisy. Doop doop. No, just a bit of sour cream. That's all we need. So basic ingredients, no gadgets, no fancy techniques. It's a commercial. I don't even see commercials. That's not true. I get them on the socials. Well, tell me all about the commercial, and I'm going to end the kitchen portion and meet you back in the living room in just a minute. Yeah, that was an hour 45, close to perfect timing. I mean, the dough normally takes an hour-ish to proof. And the potatoes I was expecting to cook a little faster. I think they got a little waterlogged. I probably could have, should have dried them, but there we are. And I'm gonna cut the recording right there.